what the problem with youth players, okay, and watching like baseball games, professional players hit or pitch or whatever, is they try to mimic exactly what these guys are doing, right?
Right.
So like, they're either wrapping their bat a lot or they're got this real high arm, slot for whenever they're getting ready to hit, and they drop down and do all these fancy things or whatever. Or, I forgot what the pitcher was the other night that pitched for the Braves, but I swear he balked like 3 or 4 times before he threw the ball. The bases were loaded.
You were saying that when he just came set multiple times.
Yeah, and he would twist his leg and lift it up, and I'm like, what are you doing? Throw the ball. It's a balk, man. Get out of here. I think one of the biggest problems within, youth baseball anyways, from what I've seen, is players try to emulate, their favorite player, which by all means, if they have a good swing or good pitching mechanics or good, hitting mechanics, go for it. But if somebody's too, I don't know what the word is, but not cohesive, not point A to point B, in my opinion, well, a lot of people try to emulate those guys.
You think of a Sheffield or someone like that. You just it's a lot of timing. So if you don't have the gift of just magical, precise timing, all that extra movement makes it really difficult for a young kid, especially if it's not their natural motion.
Right. What I teach, basically you want to go from point A to point B as fast as you can, right? And cut out all the little bitty steps in between. So
when you were
pitching,
when you were working with these youth athletes, and if you saw a bat super wrapped, a lot of movement, you would basically try to eliminate some of those things kind of right away to make it a little bit more simple. What age group are you talking here?
I was teaching kids anywhere from, 8 years old up to high school. High schoolers a little bit different, because they've already kind of set in their ways. It's more of tweaking things and stuff like that. As where with the really young kids, it's you can start to mold those guys pretty much into however you want them to hit, right, or however you want them to throw,
right.
So when I was doing that, I would cut out all the little stuff. So you see all these little guys, pitching. I think it's 9 years old, 8 years old. They start doing kid pitch. Well, they got the big arm deals and they got the leg swing, and then they're throwing it. Well, one of the best things that I was ever taught was make it simple, right? Keep everything simple. Keep everything in line. Make sure your eyes never leave the catcher's glove. Make sure your shoulders are staying square. Make sure everything's pointing towards your catcher the entire time. You'll see some guys, they'll rock back, and then they got this arm that goes up like this, and then they're coming over and throwing. So when you're doing that, your eyes are changing levels, your shoulders are changing levels, and it's just not going to end up as a good result.
I feel like that's the epitome of Tim Lincecum. Remember when we were in college and late into high school, he was Cy Young Award winner. He was, up there in the strikeouts. But when you watched his motion, that's a very difficult motion to emulate for someone that's bigger, not as much balance. He's a little dude, but he drives off the mound like 1.5 feet before he truly unloads his top half. I remember watching so much video on that guy. I had a pitching coach that recommended I watch all kinds of information from him because at the time, whoever's the top pitcher is basically the mechanics that need to be displayed to all the youth athletes. Look at this guy. He's the best. This is why he's the best. But I always found that guy's form is nearly the most difficult to emulate out of most anybody. You get that super high arm side, and you keep everything loaded up, drive off the mound 1.5 feet, and then he'd land deep down. Dude, that's a very difficult motion.
Right. The way I look at it is, especially in pitching, is your glove side, I call it your scope, right? So, if I relate to little kids by saying, do you guys play Call of Duty or Fortnite? And they say, yes, I do. And then you say, well, that scope that's on the gun, well, that's where the bullet's going to go, right, when you get, in the crosshairs or whatever. He's like, yeah, I know. So I'm left-handed, so my glove side's my right hand. So I point my glove right towards my target every time. And as I come through, I pull my glove straight back. And my shoulders stay square. They stay level. They're not up. They're not, they're not down. Because realistically, wherever this glove is pointing, that's where your hand, as it comes through, is going to replace, and that's where the ball is going to go. Hence your scope. And they're like, oh, okay. So then they start kind of doing that over and over again. And then now all of a sudden they're more consistently throwing strikes.
Did that help a lot? That analogy helped a lot with youth athletes?
Oh, yeah. The youth guys, yeah, especially like the younger kids, from like 8 to 12, I mean, that's all they're doing anyways, playing Fortnite.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're playing anymore, but, when I was coaching and doing it, I mean, that's all they played was Fortnite and Call of Duty, so.
Yeah, I don't know that it's much different, but that's it. I can remember having a real wild front arm side, and it changes the way that your accuracy and everything else is. So the idea that that's a pretty good analogy. That's a good tip for parents out there. If you were trying to figure out a way to get through to your kid, if they're playing first-person shooter games, there you go.
Well, and some coaches too will say, point the elbow, keep everything in, and then pull down. I mean, you're going from the same spot, right? You're here to here, or you're here to here.
Yeah, it's the same center of gravity shift, so it doesn't really matter if it's this, if it's this, if it's this, if it's this. I mean, it just depends on what's lining up. A little bit of style can be in there, but if you've got a kid flailing from left to right, that's not going to help.
Right, because, I mean, I know whenever I was, going through, when I first started pitching, it was in, like, 8th grade is when I first started. And I always threw hard, all that kind of good stuff. But, like, whenever I would throw, I would separate, and my arms would be like this, straight up to the sky, straight down, behind my back. I mean, it was just bad. So, my pitching coach was Al Nipper. He was the Boston Red Sox bullpen coach. And, he got me all lined up. He told me about the glove side and all this and that and keeping your arm hidden and all the kind of good stuff. And it just kind of really resonated with me, and it just clicked.
And that's what one of his big tips was always. That was the first thing he approached with everybody, or was it just you think? Because you had such a high arm side.
I think it was just me because, I mean, what I've learned through, teaching, I mean, hundreds of kids – pitching and hitting lessons is just every kid's different, right? And they all have the basic concept down. So let's figure out what it is that's causing you either A, not to be able to throw strikes, or B, not to hit the ball. A lot of kids too, like I was giving some lessons to one of my neighbor kids actually a few weeks ago, and one of the coaches that he has was basically telling him to say knob to yachty, right? So as he's hitting, when he gets ready to load, he points his knob back to yachty, the catcher, right? And then comes around. Well, to me, all you're doing is delaying your load, right? Because if you're wrapping your bat around your head, now your bat's got to come all the way back to where it was just at in order to hit the ball. So you're talking probably another, I don't know, couple split seconds, right? As where if you have your bat kind of angled backwards, right, and you load back, now all you got to do is fire to the baseball and you're already there. So what's the point of wrapping your bat like this is because it's not going to give you more torque. That's what a lot of kids will say. Oh, it gives you more torque, more momentum coming at the ball. Well, that's a lie. That's false. You can fact check me if you want, but I'm a big believer in it because, when I was growing up, I would always watch Albert Pujols hit. Because he was playing for the Cardinals. He was one of the best that was in the game at that point in time. And if you watch some of his older stuff, I mean, when he loads straight back and then just attacks the ball. So that's what I would try to emulate because that was my guy. And then, all the coaches that I had, hitting coaches and stuff like that, they all really liked what I was doing. And I mean, high school, I batted like .517 from sophomore to senior year on the varsity level. So it's just
that seems okay. That seems like it's okay.
Not bad.
Yeah, you see a lot of that stuff. Youth athletes, it's kind of interesting because for youth athletes, they have their Bryce Harper. That probably is more their decade. Who else is a big bat rapper right now? I'm trying to think. I don't know. He's probably the biggest one, right? I mean, he's got his bat wrapped all the way around his head. But how do you deny a smaller guy having that kind of power? You know what I mean? So you could pretty much say, well, is it because of his form? Most of the time, as you get a little bit older, you realize that it's mostly just these people's abilities, and that's just what they naturally do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just because you wrap that bat around all the way around your leg and back around again doesn't mean you're going to have more bat speed. He's just a gifted athlete.
Yeah, and that's why you see some of these kids when they're pitching too is when they come set and they lift their leg up, well sometimes their front leg is turning backwards, right, and then it's going forward. I call that the swing, right? You don't want to swing because what's that going to get you?
Well, it's kind of interesting too. It's like a misread of the body movement. If you watch a professional pitcher or someone that has great drive off the mound, it's their hips that slide forward. It's not their legs swinging back behind your body. It's you loading your hips that makes it look like that is here. But really, in essence, it's the hip load that generates that angle. It's not a knee.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what see. That's kind of funny. I wouldn't have thought that was such a big issue of like trying to mimic the motion at a generic level just leads to that little swinging gait knee thing. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and those are some of the biggest things that I see, within a lot of kids, and to me, it's just kind of reteaching the same thing over and over again, especially the younger ages.
Right.
And it got real repetitive, because hey, this is how you fix it. So let's start there and let's go, let's see. And usually by the time, because usually they do 2 6-week sessions and then they're done. But by the time, the 12th week rolls around, I mean, they're leaps and bounds better than what they were when they started, for sure.
I would probably agree, and I don't know that I'm inferring that you mean this, but I think kids at a really young age, they should absolutely be seeing high-level coaches nearly immediately. Mm-hmm. If your kid enjoys the game of baseball and you can get them in front of professional athletes that have had the experience and all of those steps, the micro movements of baseball, I don't know that there's probably many sports outside of maybe high-level gymnastics that milliseconds of body movements make such a drastic difference in result that if you're able to translate what needs to happen to a younger athlete, they're going to progress so much better than trying to figure it out on their own.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. And as far as like practicing and stuff like that goes for these little guys, I mean, my theory is if the kid's enjoying it and you're not forcing them to go to a practice or to a game every week, month over month, whatever, let the kid do it. If the kid is, I don't really want to do baseball today, I don't want to go to practice, or I don't want to go to hockey practice, or whatever the sport may be, then you know what? Then that's when you need to start backing off. But if the kid's thoroughly enjoying what they're doing, they're going to learn more, and they're going to enjoy going to the practice and get more out of it.
Well, it's a feel. Those high-level movements, it's a feel. If you really want to be throwing in the mid-90s or upper 80s in high school, it's a feel thing. If you're not duplicating those mechanics to make it natural for your body to be explosive, it's not going to get you anywhere. So understanding those movements of not swinging the gate and loading the hips, that's a very different thing you're doing in your body. To understand that the elbow or the hand, whichever it may be, if you're flailing out wide, it's going to pull you off your center of gravity. But if you're keeping it nice and tight, then you're going to rotate faster. That's something that you just don't feel unless you do it over and over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's all repetition, right? And it gets tricky whenever you're doing pitching, right? Because you don't want to sit there and have, your pitcher throw 8,000 pitches in 2 hours or an hour, because they're going to burn their arm out. They're going to be sore. They're going to hurt, and it's just not good for them. Even if you tell them, hey, let's go half speed or let's go 3/4 speed or whatever it is, little kids don't understand that or what that means,
Right.
Heck, half the time they can't even get it to the plate if they're not throwing as hard as they can.
Well, that's a hard thing to duplicate anyway. You want me to have accuracy. Yeah. Well, if you want to have accuracy, you got to learn how to throw it 100% with accuracy anyway.
Yeah. So, what I would always do is I would start these guys off with a nice throwing routine to get warmed up. Because a lot of my lessons were 30-minute sessions, right? So 30 minutes. So the first 15 minutes is basically stretching, doing our throwing program. And then once we get done with our throwing program, then we go into pitching off the mound. And usually I would say probably the first 3 to 4 sessions, A lot of times they don't even make it to the mound yet because they're still trying to learn the process, because I make them basically graduate to each different scenario, okay, each different step of the process to get back to the mound, because each part of my warm-up process basically is a part of the pitching motion, okay, that builds upon each other to go to the mound. So if you can't master those first couple positions, we're going to do that for a few more times until you get closer or you master it.